Hi everybody, welcome back. Glad you could tune in again. I want to continue today talking about how we handle disagreements among ourselves as Christians. And in particular by talking about one issue that can arise when things go wrong. I'm talking about the problem of exaggeration. Let me illustrate what I mean by citing an example just from the last couple of weeks that you may be familiar with. A couple of weeks ago, the author J.K. Rowling wrote a fairly extensive essay in which she criticised some aspects of the modern transgender movement. J.K. Rowling is writing, I guess you'd say, from a more traditional feminist stance. And she was concerned, like many feminists have been actually, that the transgender movement has the effect of undermining the experience of and belittling biological women by suggesting that biological women and transgender women are exactly the same. And of course J.K. Rowling wants to say, well, no, they're not. And no, we might not agree with her on everything. I'm sure we wouldn't. I think we probably would agree with that. Now, what was really intriguing was the response that J.K. Rowling received to this article. To give you a flavour of it, I'll quote from one that caught my eye. "You're literally killing trans people with your hate." Let's just think about that for a second. You don't have to look very hard to see the exaggeration in that response, do you? Is there any good reason to think that J.K. Rowling hates transgender people? I don't believe so. Not in that article. I don't think anybody's found any good reason anywhere. As to whether she's literally killing anybody, I guess that's for the courts to decide, but no evidence has been found of that either. But you can see what's happened, can't you? You've started with two people who were in actually a different position, but as the disagreement has proceeded, that's happened. They've moved further apart by, in this case, one party dramatically exaggerating the position held by another. And I'm sorry to say that this is exactly what happens all the time, including in churches and among Christians. It makes it next to impossible to imagine the outcome that Paul is looking for in Philippians 4 verse 2, doesn't it? When he wants Euodia and Syntyche to agree with one another, because there's no chance of finding any kind of common ground or shared concerns that could serve as a basis for discussion and moving towards a shared position if you're just moving apart the whole time. In fact, Paul the Apostle knew this sort of thing firsthand everywhere he goes in the book of Acts, although he does have some legitimate and significant disagreements with the people he's talking to. They frequently exaggerate what he's saying, and often it's that contributes to the riots that follow him around, and they make it impossible for any kind of reasoned discussion, much less agreement, to take place. But this sort of stuff is everywhere, and I have to say I think we need to watch it among ourselves. Let me give you a couple of examples of the problems that arise from exaggerating one another's views. The first, and this is, I guess, a hidden problem, but is no less significant for that. Actually, to exaggerate somebody's views is insulting, not just to them, but to other people. Let me explain what I mean by that. When somebody accuses J.K. Rowling of literally killing people, that is pretty insulting to the victims of actual murder, isn't it? It's not true that J.K. Rowling has killed anybody, trans or otherwise, but it is true that some people have. And it's somewhat insulting to the victims of those crimes to equate J.K. Rowling's reasoned essay with the actual act of murdering people. That doesn't really help anybody. There are more problems. The second problem, which causes more direct issues in the actual relationship itself, is that to exaggerate somebody's position is actually less persuasive in the long run. It's appealing in the short term because it gives your own view a sense of credibility, because goodness, if that's what I'm arguing against, then my view looks better, doesn't it? But actually it's ruinous in the long run. Let me give you some examples of this. In political discussions, for example, both on left and right, it's very common to hear people dramatically exaggerating the views of their opponents. I've seen, for example, conservative political figures like Douglas Murray and Jacob Rees-Mogg and Daniel Hannan here in the UK, described as fascists. Well, no, they're conservatives. And they might be to the political right of you, but that doesn't make them fascists. And of course, the same thing can happen the other way around. It's very easy for those who are concerned about the preservation of liberty and freedom and concerned about encroachment of government upon individual freedoms to say things like, they're taking away all our freedoms. No. They took away all the freedoms of the inhabitants of Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge regime. Let's not exaggerate the position that we're in, even though it may be serious. It actually doesn't help us. You may remember, going back a couple of years, what has now become a very famous interview between the psychologist Jordan Peterson and the British TV presenter Cathy Newman. And what kept happening during this interview is Cathy Newman kept trying to characterise Jordan Peterson's views by saying, so you're saying, and so you're saying this, and so you're saying that. And she said it a couple of dozen or more times in the interview, and almost every time Jordan Peterson had to say, no, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. And it got to the point where it was almost laughable. And if you want an example of how a conversation is going absolutely nowhere if one party exaggerates the views of the other, go and Google Cathy Newman, Jordan Peterson, and watch for half an hour. It's very instructive. And then you realise that many of our conversations go exactly the same way, only on different issues. And this is the third problem. It just doesn't help conflict resolution. When you have a genuine disagreement, but both parties are determined to exaggerate the faults of the other party, it's just the end, really, for that relationship. It's tragic. I'll give you one sort of example. You see it in marriages. She's always complaining. He never does anything to help. So, well, now, hold on a second. What about if we disciplined ourselves to state what the actual problem is? Is it true that she's always complaining? Okay, no, it's not. Right, well, so when does she complain? And precisely what does she complain about? And maybe there are some good reasons why she complains at those points, and then we can address those. But if you're going to say she's always complaining, this is over. And similarly, if you're going to say he never does anything to help, well, does he ever do anything to help? Well, yeah, okay, sometimes he does. Right, well, so when exactly? What precisely are the problems? And let's try and address what the problems actually are, not what the exaggerated depictions of the problems have made them out to be. We don't help ourselves, and we don't help one another by exaggerating the differences between ourselves. It's awfully appealing, because in the midst of an argument where you feel yourself losing ground, the easiest solution is to depict the other person as unreasonable by exaggerating their faults or the position they're holding. It takes a good deal of humility, as well as clear thinking and godliness, to actually state more carefully what precisely it is that we're concerned about. But that is the path to reconciliation. Lord bless you all, and I hope, God willing, to see you all soon. Bye for now.